All right, we're joined today by James Lynch, freelance MMA journalist. James, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited. Yeah. Let's do this.
Yeah. So we just wrapped up Saturday. We had a UFC event. Another main event canceled due to COVID, unfortunately. That was leading up to this coming week. UFC on ESPN was at 16, I think. We have it headlined now by Jack Hermansson and Marvin Vettori. Originally, Jack Hermansson, Darren Till, and then Jack Hermansson, Kevin Holland. And now with Vettori due to COVID and injuries. I know you did your preview the other day. I was watching, and you're going through the betting line. So I want to start off with that main event. Vettori opened as the favorite, which I found interesting. I think you were surprised by it as well. Have you had a little more time to digest it? Any explanation on your end on why he may have opened as the favorite?
The only thing I can think of is that he went to a split decision with Israel Adesanya a couple years ago. Actually, Vettori opened up as the underdog. It's the betting line that's at least from what I'm looking at here on 5 Dimes. It looks like Vettori opened up at the other underdog. So what that means is basically the public's been betting Vettori.
Interesting. Okay.
And the only thing I can think of is that he went to that split decision with Adesanya, because otherwise, how the hell do you come to that conclusion? I mean, I just I don't get it. And maybe I'm on an island here. Maybe I'm wrong, but Jack Hermansson's a good fighter. He had 1 loss in the last 6 fights, and that was to Jared Cannonier, who last time I checked, still one of the top middleweights in the division. Hermansson just came off a really impressive submission victory over Calvin Gastelum. Nobody finishes Calvin Gastelum in the first round. That's a super impressive win. And like you said, he was supposed to fight Darren Till. And so, there were the implications for what was supposed to be the Till fight was going to be, huge in terms of the middleweight division. So now he's fighting a guy in Vettori. Don't get me wrong, very talented guy, but I mean, he's ranked, I think, low in, close to, I think he's 13 or something. So I don't really understand the thinking there unless they feel like Marvin's much better at stand-up. I don't know, but then Hermansson's got some stand-up wins. So to answer your question in the short answer, no, my opinion hasn't changed. I think Hermansson still wins. I don't know what people are seeing that I'm not.
Yeah, again, like I said, I was surprised too. So he did open up as the underdog. So like you said, people ended up betting on it, which now has made him the favorite. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what people are seeing too. Again, I like Marvin. I know he's riding a 3-fight win streak. I don't know if that plays a part of it. When you look at Hermansson, he's on
just a 1 fight
because he lost. Yeah, exactly.
But you got to look at who they're fighting.
Yeah,
right? That's
exactly.
the other thing too. So that fight I referenced with Adesanya. I mean, if you go back and watch it, I remember watching it at the time thinking Adesanya clearly won. It was, it went to the distance, but it was a split. Chris Lee, that idiot judge who also did some bad judging a couple of weeks ago as well, was the one who scored it for Vettori. If you go look on MMA Decisions right now, which is a great website, by the way, it's where they track all the media scores. I think 2 media members picked Vettori, but the rest, it was I think 11 or 12 scored it for Adesanya. And that's how I scored it as well too. So people need to go watch that fight if they're basing it off that. And the other thing with that fight was that was Adesanya's 2nd UFC fight. So it's not that Adesanya that fought there is nowhere near the Adesanya who just beat Paulo Costa. So yeah. I think people are putting too much stock into that and not enough on what Jack's done. Let's not even forget we mentioned the Calvin Gastelum win, but how about the win over Jacare Souza just a couple fights before that? I mean, this guy is good. He's putting guys away. He put Gerald Mearshart away in the first round. He's a very talented guy. He's not a Conor McGregor who's going to do a bunch of self-promotion, but that shouldn't ignore you from the fact this guy's very good. And I think Marvin's got his handful on Saturday night.
Yeah, just because you mentioned Souza, I'll kind of piggyback off that. So it was originally. So now Souza's going to be fighting Holland. They pretty much just swapped Holland and Vettori. Matchup-wise for both those fights, do you think now for Vettori is he looking at this matchup with Hermansson more favorably than his original with Souza? And then same question for Holland. Is he looking at it more favorable looking at Souza now versus Hermansson, or both kind of like a...
I think they're both better fights for for Vettori. I think this is a much tougher fight. It's a better fight for him in terms of the division. If Marvin Vettori beats Jack Hermansson, he's immediately a contender. I mean, I don't think there's any denying that just with where Hermansson's ranked in the division. I think he's number 3. I had him beating, I had him potentially beating Jacare in that fight. I need to dig in a little bit more, but Jacare is 40. I mean, this is not the same Jacare that was, destroying, guys like, Chris Camozzi back in the day. You know what I mean? That Jacare he's not the same guy. So I probably still would have picked Vettori, maybe given him a slight edge, but now against Hermansson, I think Hermansson beats him. But for Holland, I I was picking Hermansson against Holland because I think Hermansson's got a better ground game. But now, I don't know. Holland, if he keeps it standing against Jacare, he could potentially finish him. I mean, we see, people forget that Kevin Holland knocked out Joaquin Buckley a couple fights ago. So, I mean, this guy, we've seen him put the pressure on certain fighters. So, yeah, to answer your question, I got Hermansson over Vettori, and I've got Holland over Jacare. But had it been Vettori and Jacare, I think I would have picked Vettori. And I think if it was Holland and Hermansson, I still would have picked Hermansson. I'm a big Hermansson guy, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Sure. Were you surprised to see that Kevin Holland was the replacement after Till? Again, he's had a fantastic year record-wise. He's possibly going to go 5-0 if he wins his next one. Yeah, so he's 4-0 now. I know, and it's been in pretty quick order. He's won the fights. I think the biggest name was probably Buckley, and Buckley wasn't Buckley then because he didn't have that knockout yet. So people probably still, in terms of the masses, didn't even know who Buckley was. So it was kind of surprising. I wouldn't have surprised me if he got a ranked opponent, but it was surprising to me that he got the number 4 guy. Again, it's situational too. Obviously, you have other people had already fought recently in the division that were in a similar ranking. Till's obviously hurt. What did you think about that initially when that was what was possibly going to be the fight?
Well, initially, I was like, yeah, this doesn't make much sense. I mean, I like the style matchup, but I mean, there's no way an unranked guy should fight the number 3 guy in the division, although we have that in a couple of weeks with Khamzat Chimaev fighting, but I digress. But then after speaking to Jack, when the fight was announced, I got an interview with him right after it was announced. 5 opponents turned him down. So, I mean, if you got 5 opponents turning you down,
5 turned down fighting Jack Hermansson.
5 turned down Jack Hermansson, and I know one of them has got to be. And I mean, it just makes it. I don't see any reason why it couldn't happen. But why is Chris Weidman not fighting Jack Hermansson? That's my question, because Weidman was supposed to fight him earlier this year in Oklahoma. I know there was COVID and there was some other stuff too, but they never rebooked that fight. So that would have made some sense in terms of Weidman's name value, in terms of him being ranked, him being, former middleweight champion. That would have made more sense from sort of the rankings perspective. And now he's fighting Uriah Hall. So it's like maybe Weidman wanted the time off. I don't know the reasoning. I'm not implying that Weidman's scared by any means, but I'm just saying that, I mean, that was interesting. And then, I don't know what's going on with Yoel Romero. I think there's rumors of him going up to 205. So I really don't know who else he would really fight. That's available. So Holland, I mean, like I said, all things considered, Holland was a fine opponent at the time, all with the circumstances, and getting Vettori I actually thinks better for Hermansson because at least Vettori's ranked.
Yeah, I think Holland said he had originally asked for Romero after I think his last fight. Like he called up matchmaking and asked things like what's going on with Romero, and I think they said he's hurt. I think that's what he said. So he might be that. But that's so. I mean, so if you have 5 people turning it down, so are people? Then does that kind of lead us to believe that people are just kind of scared in the division to face Hermansson right now?
I mean, there could be a bunch of different circumstances, right? I spoke to Jeff Neal about this as well. Neal, who's now fighting Wonderboy Thompson, coming up here on the 19th. But Neal told me there were some pretty prominent names, none I'm going to mention on here, but you can kind of guess in the rankings of guys that did not want to fight Jeff Neal, and it's like. I mean, I get it because Neal's not like a big name. Same thing with Hermansson. I mean, Hermansson's not a guy, when you think of the middleweight division, you don't really think of him that much, right? He's not like a big self-promoter. He's not a guy talking a lot of trash. He's not a guy he finishes his fights, but that still doesn't seem to captivate the attention of the division. So I can understand it a little bit, but at the same time, it's like, this is a UFC. Like, you shouldn't be allowed to pick and choose opponents. It should be based off, merit and all that other stuff. So yeah, it is a bit surprising to hear 5 of them. If there's a couple, sure, but 5 opponents, that seems really weird. Maybe he could be exaggerating, but still, it's one of those things.
I mean, when it comes to the pick and choosing, the only time the logic pans out for me is whenever, again, if it's someone, for example, like if Hermansson were to have turned down Vettori, it would have made sense to me in that he might be looking, he's like, well, I'm number 4, he's number 13. Like, this is way more upside for him, because if he loses, he might still not really drop, especially depending how he loses, if it goes to decision or if there's a controversial split, whatever. But there's a lot more to lose for Hermansson, because if Hermansson loses, now it's like, now I lost to number 13. So when 100%. It comes to those situations, I can understand it more.
And also there's a bit of politics involved in here too, as well, that I do need to sort of point out here. So who's Marvin Vettori's manager? He's an Ali Abdelaziz guy. If you notice, Ali's fighters tend to get a lot of not favorable matchups, but they get a lot of opportunities. Cody Garbrandt comes to mind, right? Doesn't have a single win at flyweight, and they were going to give him the title shot. It looks like Garbrandt's probably going to fight the winner anyways of Moreno and Figueiredo next week. I have no doubt that played a role as well in Marvin getting this fight too. Not to say that Marvin doesn't deserve it. I mean, if Holland's out and they needed someone to, keep Hermansson busy and to fight, I mean, Vettori's a great replacement, but I also feel like his management also helped him get that fight as well, which, kudos to them. I mean, they get a lot of big fights for their clients.
Sure. Let's actually talk about that now that you brought it up. So in general, whenever we see someone go up or down in division and then immediately they get a title fight, What are your thoughts on that? Because I think, like, as a fan, I look at it, I mean, the matchups, like, it would have been cool to see Figueiredo having fought Garbrandt. Yeah, that would have been a hell of a fight. But then when you look at it, it's like all those other people, though, like, that are already in the division, that have their rankings established, that have been fighting for it, and then you just supersede everyone and you just jump to the front of the line. Now, maybe again, like you said, part of it might be the management, but let's say if we were to take that out, do you think there's anything else behind it that leads it? Is it just really when it comes to just the dollars of what's going to sell more?
Yeah, there's that too. And this is an argument I've had with a lot of people sort of on my podcast as well when I sort of get viewer questions, because I'm more of a merit guy, right? Like, I think if you like Lauren Murphy's a good example, right? Like, Lauren Murphy was supposed to fight Cynthia Calvillo. She ends up having to fight a newcomer because Calvillo tests positive. She finishes that opponent. That should get her a title shot. She's got, I think, three wins in a row or something. Andrade has 1 win in the weight class. She's likely going to get to fight Valentina next. And don't get me wrong, Andrade and Shevchenko is going to be more of a competitive fight, in my opinion. However, what's the point of you in fighting in the division if wins aren't going to be counted for? Like, to me, that's where I have an issue. And it's the same thing with Garbrandt. Like, yes, Garbrandt came off a win. Yes, he's a former champion, but he's lost 3 of his last 4. Why should he get a title shot? And this whole excuse of, well, it's going to bring more eyeballs to the division. I don't know. Like, is Garbrandt really that big of a star? People always point to, well, he's got 1 million followers on Instagram. Well, I don't think that means much. I mean, that doesn't necessarily translate to pay-per-view buys and all that. So, I mean, I would rather see the UFC build that flyweight division on its own. If Cody wants to come down, that's fine. Get him to fight someone else and then give him a title shot. But it's not like it's a situation where the division is lacking contenders. I think flyweight has plenty of good talent in that division. And, you can definitely, put some people in that situation. And the same thing goes for flyweight. I know Valentina keeps picking off all these opponents, but when you have someone like Lauren Murphy, who's, like I said, been winning fights impressively, you shouldn't deny her that. So yeah, I'm not a fan of that stuff unless it's a situation, like I said, where like you're in dire need of something. Well, here's another one too, not to give you an even longer answer, but like, Adesanya moving up to fight Blachowicz, like, yeah, again, I don't see the need to do that right now because yes, there aren't as many big names at 205 now with John Jones gone, but at the same time, like, what about Glover Teixeira? This guy should get a title shot now, and he's not, because Adesanya wants to move up to hopefully fight Jones, and Adesanya has 2 title defenses. Like, he's got other work ahead of him at middleweight, including Robert Whittaker, who just, a lot that's been all twisted in the media that Whittaker doesn't want to fight Adesanya. I interviewed him. He wants to fight Adesanya. He does not want to fight him in March. He wants to fight him a little bit later because he's got a kid on the way. So this is what I'm talking about. We're seeing a lot of these matches where the rankings don't seem to mean anything and people can just jump from divisions. I get it from a money perspective, but I also am like, we got to treat the rankings as something in the sport. It
is frustrating, especially like you mentioned Teixeira. I mean, you look at the year he's had again, and you look at him, he's 41, and he's just kicking ass right now. And then go and tell him, hey, you're gonna take a back seat for now. We're gonna possibly book Adesanya instead. It's like, again,
and they announced that Adesanya fight. I know it's not official, but do you remember they announced that right before Santos and Teixeira?
Yeah.
And like, if you're Thiago Santos, like you already have a knockout win over the champion.
Yeah.
Even if he would have beat Glover, like, it means nothing because he's not going to get to fight him next. It's silly. I just like the timing of some of these fight announcements are just, it's insane. I don't really understand.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder the psyche of that too. Like you mentioned, you're fighting pretty much for that opportunity to fight what you would think to fight the light heavyweight next. And then before the fight, you find out they already booked the title fight with someone that's not even in your division, and then go into that fight with now it's like, well, what's the purpose of, like, now am I gonna have to wait for that decision to be made, and then ultimately fight that guy? It's confusing to me, some of the matchmaking, but again, when you think about, well, what's gonna sell, seems like that's the case. To go back to the Figueiredo Garbrandt, I think, just in my opinion, I think that would probably do better in terms of buys than Figueiredo and Moreno. I think that's where his name will be considered more over that.
I'm totally with you there. Yeah. I definitely agree with that sort of aspect. But like, I was kind of bringing this up the other day. Like, is a Jan, like, and people argued with me on this, but like, is like an Israel Adesanya and Jan Blachowicz fight a bigger fight? Like, is that much more of a difference than, say, if Adesanya fought Whittaker again? I don't think it is. I know it's for 2 belts, but like, I think the average fan has no idea who Jan Blachowicz is, the same way that they don't know much about a Jack Hermansson or whoever, right? Like, so that's where I think people exaggerate that a little bit too much. It's like Cejudo fighting Volkanovski. Like, I don't think that's much of a bigger fight than Volkanovski fighting Ortega or something. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. So I'd like to see the metrics. I'd like some sales guy to come here and show me the data that proves me wrong here. But that's how I feel.
That's what's unfortunate when it comes to the buys. They don't always announce it or give you like a range or whatever it is. Like, it'd be nice to know, but that's their business, whatever. So something that I heard, I think you were mentioning, I think you had a viewer question in your preview about Sean O'Malley. I think they asked, what's next for him in your opinion, and you said they should give him like a confidence boosting fight, give him someone that he can kind of rebound off of, so to speak. I think I want to kind of push back, or kind of ask a little more about that from you. So that was O'Malley's first loss. What is he at? 11-1, 12-1. And I mean, obviously, he got hurt. He got hit and then got hurt. But I personally don't know if he really needs a kind of a fight like that yet. I think if you can give him whatever, now obviously it might not be a ranked because he got dropped, but I don't know if it's necessarily needed for him to have like that kind of a confidence booster fight. I think just because I don't know if he's necessarily shaken too much. I think initially looked like it. He seemed kind of salty in the beginning, definitely. But I feel he would still fare fine. Will he win? I don't know, but I don't know if he necessarily needs that. So I was kind of wondering your logic behind why you were thinking let's get him one of those. Is it just more to kind of make him to kind of bring his name back?
Yeah, I think you need another highlight reel win to sort of erase that whole thing with O'Malley, because that, or with Chito Vera, because that couldn't have gone. I mean, outside of him maybe getting like flat, like officially like knocked out, like Michael Bisping against Dan Henderson type thing. I mean, that's about as bad as it gets, because he lost the fight, then he like claims it was like an injury and he didn't get hurt, and then he just was like almost in denial about the loss. And so that's why I think O'Malley's one of the few sort of cash cows for the UFC in terms of, him being like easy to market, and, he does a great job with his brand. And one of the things I don't think people give O'Malley credit for is like, he really taps into like the YouTube, like tweener audience that a lot of other UFC fighters don't. So you're only good for business if you're winning. And I think if you give him like a Dominic Cruz or a Dillashaw or someone like that, and he doesn't win, that stock's going to hurt. A guy like Conor had lost before he even came into the UFC. So him losing is not a big deal. But for O'Malley, he's young enough where you want to still preserve him and try and build him back up and things of that nature. So that's why I think like getting him a winnable fight against a guy that, he can potentially get another highlight reel finish on, that's the easiest way to forget that loss. Because if O'Malley loses 2 in a row, his stock's going to plummet. And not to say that he can't bounce back, but 2 straight losses for anyone is not good for business. So that's why I think he'd be better off getting like a veteran or something like that. Like even people saying like him fighting like a Nathaniel Wood, like I don't think that makes sense. Like give him a vet, give him like an Eddie Wineland type, and then get him the highlight reel finish, and then we'll sort of go from there.
I can understand that, especially I'm sure Dana wasn't probably particularly happy that last fight ended up like that, because he's a contender series guy, and I know Dana was whatever is the correct tense, big on Sean. So I guess we'll see there. Another guy I wanted to bring up, probably again one of those guys that no one knows. Reason I know I'm Armenian, so I wanted to ask you about it. So Edmen Shahbazyan, he fought Derek Brunson right last, was undefeated going into that, lost pretty handedly. That was beginning of August, and before that fight, what was being discussed a lot was he was possibly on pace to be the youngest champion, to dethrone John Jones. Was 23 and some days. I think Edmen at the time of his fight was 22 or late 21 and some days. So again, he was, I think, 8 or 9 in the middleweight before the Brunson fight. Now he's 11. What were to kind of go back to that fight, when that got booked, what the biggest eyebrow raiser for me with that fight was when the fight was starting, Shahbazyan opened at -300, I think, which I was like, look, I want him to win. -300 is crazy. Like I'd be slamming that underdog money line. So when that started, what did you think? I felt Brunson was completely disregarded and disrespected initially.
He was, but also we got to look at the context of what happened back then. If you remember, initially when that fight was booked, because I think they rebooked it a few times because of the COVID stuff and all that. Edmen Shahbazyan came off a huge win in that fight before against Brad Tavares. You remember that? It was UFC 244. It was the card that Trump and The Rock and everyone was there at. And he knocked out Tavares in the first round. Like the last guy to knock out Brad Tavares in the first round was Robert Whittaker. So I don't, and there's of course after the fight, everyone's like, oh, he was rushed and he was overrated. No, he wasn't. He beat guys. He had good wins before that. He beat Darren Stewart. He beat Jack Marshman. Like he had quality wins and quality finishes leading up to that fight. So, and with Brunson, it was a bit of a wild card, right? Like the whole thing with Brunson is like, is this guy more than a gatekeeper, right? Because we've seen performances where he hasn't looked good and he's got finished in the first round like he did against Israel Adesanya. So we really didn't know what was going to happen. Yeah, the line was too steep. I'll agree with that. With the amount of fights that Brunson had, the amount of experience for sure. And it just, the problem was like, there wasn't a point where we knew where the ceiling was with Edmen Shahbazyan. That was the fight, unfortunately, for him, was that we knew that obviously he's not at that level yet. His cardio didn't look good. He didn't seem to like getting hit. And then you also got a question where he's training as well. I mean, that's sort of been a running joke in the MMA scene for a while, training at Glendale Fight Club. So first off, like I have no issue with him being the favorite. Minus 300, yeah, a bit steep. They should have given Brunson some more respect. But this idea that Shahbazyan was rushed or all that, I don't buy into that at all. Brad Tavares is a very good fighter. He was a tough veteran. He's a guy that's been in the UFC for a long time. He had a long layoff heading into the fight, but Tavares went 5 rounds with Israel Adesanya, I think the year before. So this is a guy that I think for Shahbazyan to finish him in the first round the way he did, I think the hype was justified at the time. And I don't think there was any issue with him fighting Brunson. And even with him losing, Shahbazyan's so young, he can rebuild himself. So that's my take on the whole thing.
Yeah. So that was originally booked, I think March, and then COVID hit, and then April, and then COVID. That was the final event because UFC canceled 3 events. I think that one was the third one, so that got canceled. And then Brunson was getting married, so then it ended up getting rebooked in August. Do you think that possible layoff, that much, it taking 5 months longer than it was originally supposed to, may have also cost Shahbazyan in a way? Had it been earlier?
I don't think so. I think every fighter. So I don't think the layoff had much to do with it. Shahbazyan, as far as I know, all he does is fight and train and all that. So it's not something that I think was going to hinder him too much. I think it was just a gap in skill. I think Brunson, has been around forever. You look how many more fights he has than Shahbazyan. I think it was more of a case of that he just fought a more experienced guy and he'll learn from it. I don't think it was anything to do with the layoff or anything of that nature. Right?
It does seem the endurance is an issue. I think prior to this fight, Edmen had 1 or 2 fights that went to decision, or at least went into the third. He won 1 by decision, I believe, but he looked absolutely gassed at the end of it. And then also during the Contender Series in August, there was another fighter that I believe trains at GFC too, is Melsik Bagdasaryan, I believe is his name. Yeah, he looked fantastic in the first round. It looked like he was. I forget the name of the fighter he was fighting, unfortunately. But
I do too. I know exactly the fight.
But he was really pounding on him, but he was just eating all the shots. He wasn't going down. And then you saw what happened second and third round with Melsik he was absolutely gassed. He had nothing left. So like you mentioned, it's kind of that running joke in the MMA community about where he trains, but it kind of leads you to wonder, like, is something going on during the training where they can't get past that first round without looking absolutely gassed? And it's not unique to them. You see this with other fighters too. But it's very interesting to see, again, these are athletes that are well above and beyond of big majority of the people in the world. But you watch them go past the first round and then they're just panting or barely up. They're not nearly the same as when the fight initially started. That's where I kind of look at those two at GFC. I'm wondering, is there something in the endurance department that's lacking, or what might be?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I think the endurance thing is really because I'm not mistaken, but I know for certain gyms, like you do your conditioning somewhere else, right? Like I know, for example, at Factory X, I know a lot of them are coached by Mark Montoya, but they actually go to Landau Performance to do their conditioning. So okay. I don't know if that's necessarily directly, like maybe Edmen does conditioning, sure. But I would think that I think it might just be a coincidence more than anything.
Got it. Okay. So last thing with the about the upcoming pay-per-view, UFC 256. So what fight or two are you looking forward to most?
The fight? Well, actually, we got a bit of breaking news here. I was looking forward to Khamzat Chimaev and Leon Edwards. That fight's now off at the time of recording this.
That's officially now? It's
officially off because Edwards now got COVID.
Oh, geez. Oh,
Yeah,
man.
so that's off. So I was looking forward to that, but I'll go with kind of I'll go with kind of one that maybe people aren't giving enough credit for, and that's the co-main event of that fight: Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Jeff Neal. I cannot wait for that fight because it's kind of could be a changing of the guard fight. Wonderboy's been at the top of the welterweight division for a while. You've got Jeff Neal, who I've said for a while, even after Contender Series, that this guy is the dark horse of this division. He had a health scare earlier this year. We didn't know when he was going to fight again. He's fighting Wonderboy. I think Neal can win that fight, and I think if he does, he's going to get fast tracked to a title shot because he's very good wrestler, very good striking. I mean, you see what he did to Mike Perry. I'm really excited for that fight a lot, and I actually, had the chance to speak to both guys before the matchup, and there's just a lot of respect there between the two fighters. So you got to love a fight like that.
Is Neal ranked? I forget.
Magny? Oh, Jeff Neal.
Jeff Neal.
I believe he is. Let me just check here before I get people saying he is ranked. Let me just see here. I believe he is. And if he isn't, then that's a travesty. Let's see what we got here. Yes, he's number 11.
Oh, he's number 11. Okay. And then I think Wonderboy's 4 or something like that. 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
He's 5. He's 5. Masvidal's 4. Why is he 4 when Thompson doesn't win over him? Anyways, it's aside the point.
Sure. So, I know obviously Khamzat had, when he started, he had 2 fights in 10 days and then 3 fights in, I don't know, what was it, a month, 2 months, whatever. And then the thing was, oh, well, who's he fought? He's got quick finishes, sure, but what if he gets challenged? What's he going to look like? So then they give Leon Edwards, and what a year for Leon Edwards. I mean, first COVID happened, so it's tough to even get him booked, tough to get him anywhere. And then he finally gets this fight, and then it's possibly in jeopardy because Chimaev gets COVID. They're like, let's wait and see. And now you're announcing, they just said apparently, or Ariel Helwani just announced that now Leon has it, so now it's completely scrapped. But to go on to Khamzat, look, I think he's looked great, but I was really looking forward to see, like, this will be a true gauge because, again, he's calling everyone out. He says, I'll fight anyone, I'll fight anytime, anywhere, I don't care. What were you thinking going into that fight? Were you leaning one way or another on who might take that?
You're talking the Edwards and Chimaev fight, right? Okay, yeah. I actually had Edwards in that one because we have more evidence of what he's been able to do in the octagon, and I think what Chimaev has done is amazing. But I think it's a case of a guy maybe being a little overhyped against a guy who's, I think, very underrated in Leon Edwards. I mean, the last loss of Leon Edwards' career was against Kamaru Usman, and granted, Leon's not finishing guys, he's not going out there and causing damage the same way that Chimaev has, but at the same time, he's got a lot of quality wins. I had an argument with someone saying that Leon's fought nobody. I was like, what are you talking about? He has a win over Vicente Luque, Gunnar Nelson, RDA. RDA, for as much flack as that guy gets, he had a good win over Kevin Lee last year. And like people are saying that he's not good anymore. It's like, come on, like he can still get wins at a high level. So I was leaning Leon on that one. I mean, it wasn't a confident pick because obviously Chimaev has proved everyone wrong in a lot of instances. He's gone out there and just starched everyone. But I think Leon's experience, I mean, you can't ignore that. Chimaev has 9 fights, and you've got a guy in Edwards who's been a staple in the UFC since 2014. People also forget that Leon Edwards has the second fastest knockout in welterweight history. He knocked out Seth Pajinski in 8 seconds. Like, people forget that, like, it's just like to think that this guy's not good. It's just crazy to me. So, it would have been a tough fight to pick, but I would have given a slight edge to Leon, especially if the fight went later in the rounds, because he has that experience. Chimaev's never gone 5 rounds in his career.
Yeah. And what was interesting was, I believe when the lines were announced, I think it was like -160 in favor of Chimaev or something like that. Right when the fight was announced, I don't know if there was much activity on it after the fact, but would have been curious to see as it got closer to fight week, right up to the fight, what those lines would have closed at. So 2020 now wrapping up, we have 3 events left. Overall, how's this 2020 been for you? And when you look at the UFC, what do you think about the year?
I think it's got to be considered a success. I mean, they're the only sport that's been doing consistent events. They've had some, positive tests and some stuff shuffled around, but in general, they haven't, it's crazy to think that they've been consistent every weekend pretty much. I mean, I think they had a little break in between there, but it has to be considered a success. And, good for them for figuring out a way to do this, where you do events at the arena you own at the Apex. And then you have this thing in Fight Island, which, as far as I know, the Saudi governments or in Abu Dhabi, the government there is paying for pretty much everything. So, I mean, it's a winning formula for them to continue to do events and not miss a beat and keep their fighters active. I mean, that's one thing we got to look at here. The fighters are getting paid. I mean, in a time when a lot of people are out of work, I think it's been very encouraging to see what Dana White and his team have been able to do.
And I believe at the press conference after this past weekend's fights, someone asked Dana about when's the return to Fight Island. I forgot. He said International Fight Week or something. I don't know what the dates for that is. I think it's sometime in January. And I believe he said they're working on having 3 events in a 7-day span, similar to how they had done it, I think, back in July. So it'd be a Saturday, a Wednesday, and then another Saturday. So, I mean, and look, I think almost all of the cards this year have been great. Like even some like this past weekend, you maybe looked on paper and may have overlooked it. I watched it. I thought it was a good card, top to bottom overall. Especially, props to the prelims. The past few events, the prelims have been really good. If you had, again, not this past one, but the fight before that, the first fight, again, I'm forgetting the name. The first fight got performance of the night, if I'm not mistaken, for both guys. So top to bottom, again, it's not just like main card is doing great. It's like, no, even the prelims are showing up and doing a pretty good job. So again, I think it's been a fantastic year too.
No, I was just going to say that, it's usually the cards where they're like, oh, it's not great on paper that end up delivering. And it's one of those things where, you can't, I think every card has some value, whether it's an up and coming prospect, whether it's like a surprise finish that you weren't expecting, it has a little bit of everything. And remember, this card went toe to toe with the Tyson card as well. And I still thought it was a pretty good event overall. So like I said, the UFC's been doing a pretty good job of keeping their fighters active, giving us quality fights. And I've been pretty entertained this year. I mean, it is tough to watch fights every weekend. I mean, you do get a bit fatigued, but it's been good to watch some of the matchups they put together this year.
Sure. So last thing I want to ask you, James, is so like we mentioned, you're a freelance MMA journalist. Before we started, you're saying it's too many to name. It's going to take some time. So you're doing this with you're doing what you're doing with a lot of different publications. How'd you get to where you're at? Did you study journalism? How'd you ultimately get to where you are?
Yeah, I'll give you the Coles notes because it'll take a while.
Yeah,
but, and I have a video of this on my channel because people ask me all the time, how'd you get into MMA? And so I did a video on it. So I can kind of give you the Coles notes there. But basically, I took communications in university, did broadcast journalism in college. So I was already like educated, learned how to edit, learned how to basically learn everything about the television industry at the time. And 2008, I worked at Fight Network in Toronto when I was living there at the time. And that's really where I got to, really learn a lot. Mauro Ronaldo was there at the time, John Pollock. There's a lot of really talented people there. So I really got to sort of carve my teeth working there. I left Fight Network. I went and worked at TSN, which is like the ESPN here in Canada as an editor. And then I just freelanced on the side. And I did that up until October of 2017. I had a couple day jobs in between there in terms of that, but I always freelanced on the side. And then I started doing video interviews remotely back in about, I think 2014 around there. So, and then I just noticed that a lot of people weren't doing like remote video stuff. And if they were, it wasn't with a lot of prospects. So I really focused on that. And a lot of the prospects that I interviewed are now in the UFC. So it was really like a good timing in terms of me getting into it and me deciding to do this. So fast forward to October of 2017, I quit my day job because I was becoming a dad and I couldn't do both on the side. I couldn't have a full-time job and cover fights as well. So I ended up, just leaving my day job and got on with a couple outlets. And then I freelanced, full-time basically from then until May of 2019. Then I got hired at The Score as their senior news editor. And then I was working there up until June of this year when they just eliminated my position out of the blue. And so now I'm back to freelance, but I couldn't be happier. Really lucky to be doing this. Like I said, I work for about 12 different outlets. I do some editing as well. I host a show every week with Chris Cyborg, the Bellator champion. And I just got a lot of really cool, fun things going on right now. But the biggest thing is I'm my own boss. So I can kind of pick and choose what work I want to do. I can pick and choose what outlets I want to work for. And I'm not limited. That was one thing with The Score where I was exclusive. So I couldn't take on any other work. Whereas now I can kind of pick and choose what I want to do at my own schedule. And things couldn't be better, man. I'm super blessed, super grateful.
You have great content too. I mean, I really, really like your interviews, especially when you kind of have those clips that come out where you ask a singular question to each of them and then you kind of go through it. I think I haven't really seen anything else like that in the MMA space, so it's pretty cool.
There's a few now that are starting to kind of
after the fact
my fighter picks and stuff, which is fine. I mean, look, it's not. I didn't invent the concept, but I have an advantage because I do this full time and I interview more fighters than anyone. Like that's across the board. Like you even see. You do like a virtual media day even now, like with COVID. I mean, there's probably 7 fighters there. I mean, some days I'm doing 11 interviews. I'm not even kidding. Like, because I have so much content, like so many fighters that I can talk to and so many outlets that I work for that really I'll just, I can basically schedule my day how I want in terms of how many interviews I want to do. So I the luxury of that obviously is that I get to interview so many fighters, so I can do compilation videos, and those do really well on my channel. I did one last week on asking fighters who the best looking, fighter is and things, just fun topics like that. But I mean, that video is at like 200,000 views right now. So I'll gladly take that.
Yeah. Then that I saw that one, and it's cool getting the fighter picks because it's nice to see what a fighter's actual perspective is on another fighter because they obviously know what they're doing. So it's cool to see what are they thinking. And one of the surprising ones to me, just to end on, is when you had them picking between Figueiredo and Moreno. There was a decent amount of the fighters that have went with Moreno, expecting him to pull it off, which I found interesting.
Well, and it's funny because I had a lot of people picking Gaethje over Khabib as well. Like I find it interesting. Now, look, I always tell this to people because people are like, oh, they don't know anything. Well, look, like it's just an opinion video.
Yeah.
Like fighters are not spending time watching tape like some of these gambling tout guys are that have time to do that, and all the power to them if they have time to do it. But like a lot of these fighters are just going off memory like the rest of us, and they're going off who they think is, and maybe they do have some insight. Maybe they have trained with someone. Maybe they know, they're picking up things that we don't see. But a lot of people got to not take the video so seriously. People freak out when they're like, oh, these fighters are more like it's an opinion. That's it. It's just, they could be wrong, they could be right, but that's why I put them out there, because I feel like people should know how fighters are feeling about a certain fight.
Yeah, absolutely. James, I appreciate it. I know we have limited time, so I appreciate you making the time today. I know you got other interviews. It was great picking your brain. I'm going to throw all of your links in our description. James Lynch on YouTube. Just give me 1 minute right after we sign off. I just want to quickly give you something off camera. And so yeah, I appreciate it, man. Looking forward to the fights this weekend and kind of hearing, again, your commentary throughout, your takes and everything. Thank you.